Hello, I'm Jorge Gestoso. Welcome to a new program. On today's show, in which way Special Counsel Robert Mueller's testimony at the Congress changed the debate on impeachment? We ask our guests, Attorney Joseph Malouf. Joseph Malouf, a warm welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
It is really an impact on the debate of the impeachment after Robert Mueller's testimony?
I think it did. I'm not sure that it had an impact like the Democrats wanted the impact to be. I think they expected more drama and more direct answers to questions that an investigator within the guidelines of the Department of Justice is not able to answer. So I think a lot of people were disappointed. They wanted to hear Special Counsel Mueller say, well, the president violated the law this way and that way. But you really can't ask that of somebody whose job is to also protect the integrity of the system. And you can't say somebody may have committed a crime or maybe they violated the law if they don't have a tribunal, a court, where they can defend themselves. And because the president cannot be charged with any crime while he's in office, based on a letter of office, the Office of Legal Counsel of the Department of Justice, that you cannot charge a sitting president, then Mueller didn't deliver the big explosions that Democrats wanted, but it did have an impact.
But for Democrats then, it was more or less than what they expected?
It was less. It was definitely less than they expected. They wanted Mueller to say, charge the president or, impeach him. He cannot do that. That is not his job, and it wasn't, some of the questions weren't really appropriate questions for him. I also felt that he didn't want to be there. And because he doesn't want to be the person that tells the American people, impeach President Trump. He doesn't want to, that's not his job. He investigates, Congress then decides if they want to impeach. And he doesn't want to take that on. I think Congress would prefer that Mueller would recommend it directly, but he wouldn't do it.
It was clear after the testimony that he established or confirmed certain things.
Yes.
That President Trump is not exonerated,
correct,
as he says it is. This is not a witch hunt, as President Trump says it is. The investigation could continue after he leaves the Oval Office, correct, and that many of the answers, the written answers that he was sent to answer, could be questionable, the truthfulness.
They were false. Basically, a lot of the questions he answered based on what he said publicly and based on other witnesses and based on what they looked at were not true.
And then we're talking about Jeffrey Nadler, the president of the Judiciary Committee of the House of Representatives, says any person, any citizen in the U.S. with all those cases absolutely will be impeached.
Well, there were 1,400 federal prosecutors that reviewed the evidence that Mueller cites in his report. And they all signed a letter saying that they all would have charged the president with crimes had he not been the president in office. And there was this Office of Legal Counsel letter, policy, that says that you cannot charge him, but that technically the behavior rises to the point where there could be legal action taken against them.
And among the Democrats, after the testimony, it has increased the number of members that they want the impeachment. We're talking already 105. There are a total of 235 Democrats, so they need at least 118, but constitutionally they need half of the members, of the totality of the members of the House of Representatives, 435, in order to start the impeachment. So the numbers are not there yet.
Well, they're not there yet, but they want to do it. They just don't want to do it yet. There's no question with the Democrats that they want to impeach, see this president impeached, and if possible, and some of them only if, he then is removed from office. There's an old saying that you don't attack the king unless you kill him. And they don't want to attack this president, not be able to be successful, and then run into a problem during the election time saying, well, what are the Democrats doing? Wasting time with all of this and nothing comes from it. And that's what Nancy Pelosi, who's the president of the whole Congress, House of Representatives, is afraid of.
The strategy of President Trump. in order to gather information. That's exactly what Jerry Nadler wants to. He's trying to put any possible obstacle to impede it or to delay it. Is that going to, in that case, swim against the tide because he's going to continue to do this?
I think so. I think that has been his style since he was in private practice, or he was in the private sector. Now, the crimes that the president could confront of obstruction of justice, they have a 5-year statute of limitations. So if President Trump is reelected in 2020, even after he leaves office, he would not face any of these prosecutions because they're only good for 5 years. So that's one factor that the House needs to consider. The second factor, and I think this is more like the reality of it, I think that the president realizes that if you help, if you provide witnesses, you provide documents, and you're guilty, that you're probably going to end up being removed. Now, if you're innocent, you provide all this information because you want your name cleared. You want the process to go on so that your name can be cleared, not tell witnesses not to show up. And in the whole story here, Don McGahn, the White House counsel, who was told by the president to fire Mueller and to do a bunch of illegal things, like fabricate evidence in the case.
He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to fire.
Right. That he never told him to do that when he did, and other people knew about it, and they ended up leaving the White House. So the president is ordered that he cannot testify. The president keeps on ordering people not to cooperate, and while Nadler has to go to court, Congressman Nadler has to go to court and ask the court to decide this. It's taking so long that by the time they get that resolved, this will be over, and the president will be reelected and then probably finish his second term. So this is a very frustrating thing for Democrats.
The big question mark that Democrats have, is which way we go. They say, should we pursue the constitutional way in terms of trying to impeach him, or the going to the polls and beat him in the polls? And there is division among the members of the Democratic. Is that what's going on?
Absolutely, and it's actually about half of people who say, you know, let's not wait anymore, let's impeach him. Here's why it's a problem. In order to impeach him, all you need is 51%, just a simple majority of the House. Because Democrats control more than a simple majority, accusing the president by filing articles of impeachment is not going to be a problem. However, in order for that to be worth the fight, according to Nancy Pelosi and the other half,
the conservative
half of the Democrats, you need to make sure this is worth it, meaning that, yeah, you convince the jury that he's guilty. And the jury in an impeachment case is the Senate, which has 100 senators, and in order to convict somebody, you have to have 67 votes, 2/3 majority. So 67 votes, there are only 47 Democrat senators, so you need another 20 senators that are Republican. So the question really becomes, according to Nancy Pelosi, do we want to do all of this, then have Trump basically not be convicted because the Republican senators are clearly staying by his side, and then we then suffer the consequences 2020 at the ballot box because he'll claim it was a witch hunt and it was unfair and he got vindicated and exonerated and it's all the fault of the Democrats. Or we don't do anything now, keep everything in the public eye so that they know what he did, and then on 2020 not have any repercussions, not have any problem. Oh, you know, we accused the president and nothing happened. So that's a difficult question. I mean, there's no doubt that that is a very difficult question for the leader of the House to decide.
Richard Nixon went through a sort of similar situation in terms of the Senate. And how come, in that case, the Senate voted against?
Well, he never got to the Senate. The House drafted the articles, and they were basically ready to impeach him when he said, okay, I'm going to quit. And he resigned. Now, there was a big difference back then, which was there was a certain dignity and certain rules that we were expecting of the President of the United States. And he said he wasn't a crook, and he said he didn't do anything wrong. And then John Dean, one of the attorneys of the White House counsel, came out and basically said everything he wanted to that happened. And they heard the audio tapes that the Supreme Court said you have to produce the audio tapes. And they heard the president lying. That back then, the mentality of the Republican was that this is not dignified. This is behavior unbecoming a U.S. president, and we cannot tolerate it. And Richard Nixon knew that this Senate, the Senate that he had, even though it was a majority Republican, was going to convict him. And for that reason, he resigned. We're dealing with different Republicans now. This is not the same Republican of Richard Nixon.
We have heard immediately after the testimony of Robert Mueller from the president, big win, big victory. Again, that confirms it's a witch hunt, and members of the two Judiciary Committee and the other committee saying it's time to turn the page. Are they right?
They may be. I think if Democrats are not going to seriously take the risk of impeaching the president right now, with the chance that they may not get a conviction because they may not be able to change the minds of many senators, then they need to put this behind them and concentrate on the next election. Because in 2018, the country spoke. They voted for the House of Representatives. Every American had a chance to vote. This was not a selected election. This was a national election. And what happened? They overwhelmingly elected Democrats to clean up the mess that Trump has created. So I think that the electorate is there. And if they hear from witnesses on some of the things the president did regarding this investigation and what his campaign did with regard to Russia, I mean, there was no quote-unquote conspiracy, but there was collusion. There was willingness. That's what the special counsel said, that the Trump campaign officials were more than willing to accept help from the adversary that is Russia in order to help Trump win and to hurt Hillary Clinton. That's a crime. He said it. It's not only when Adam Schiff of the Senate Intelligence, the House Intelligence Committee asked the question of Mueller. He said, is this immoral? And he said immoral. It's also illegal and it's wrong to accept help from a foreign country. And the president was interviewed recently on television, on ABC, and he said that he would still accept help from a foreign nation if it means it could help him beat the opponent. That's just another world. They have to go against President Trump clearly to demonstrate, because that's the number one priority for Democrats. Democrats who want to elect a nominee want to elect somebody that can definitely win against Donald Trump. Because while the Democrats may have an agenda, and while someone else in the group, in the big group, might want to support that agenda and might be a great candidate, if that candidate doesn't win against Trump, there's no point. So the first priority is to make sure that candidate can win. Kamala Harris acted very aggressively.
A senator from California who is African-American.
African-American senator who used to be a prosecutor and a federal prosecutor, took on Joe Biden, the vice president during the Barack Obama administration, who's former senator and also a candidate to run, and demonstrated strength, confidence, intellect. And those sort of qualities in a debate could be important, because everybody's looking at this candidate not against Joe Biden or anybody else in the campaign. They're looking at him against Trump and make sure that they can beat Donald Trump.
From the perspective of the U.S. principles, even if you have to pass a test to become a citizen of the U.S., one of the questions or the answers that you have to go through, it says the U.S. is a capitalistic government, a capitalistic state, and we believe in the free market. The question could be is if the President of the United States should be governed for the capital or for the people. So we see, for example, that Trump is sticking to the principle that we are going to make the economy work because we're making the capital reproduce very quickly, lower taxes for the very rich, all the protections that they call in English regulations disappeared, so I can produce harming the environment and there's no problem. In a way, he is sticking to the principle that the capitalism works well. And on the other hand, you have Bernie Sanders that says we should be governed for the people. We cannot keep 40 million Americans with no medical insurance, students' debts up to here, the middle class disappearing, so on and so forth. So the argument of President Trump is, I am making what the principle of this country is about, be capitalistic. Are the Democrats going to have an argument in order to be elected if they are presenting another way for the country to be governed?
I don't think so. I don't think Democrats can argue against capitalism and expect to win the election. This is a capitalistic society and will always will be. But what Bernie Sanders did is came up with this term of socialist Democrat. And people are, Trump is taking advantage of this, saying, oh, you guys want to be like Venezuela. Donald Trump is wrong. There is no comparison between Bernie Sanders. What he wants to do is expand social benefits and certain things that the government should do as a government. For example, the school system in America, it's all public schools. It's a right, a constitutional right every person has, including undocumented children. They all have a right to a public education, a free public education. And for that we have a socialized system because it's a public school, it's socialized. We also have that for the police. We don't have private police, we have government police.
Medicare.
Social security. When you get your retirement, it's a social service. Medicare is a social service. So we do have those things. He wants to expand that to include every single American to get health insurance. That's it. That he is not saying that Facebook and Microsoft and all these large corporations are going to cease to exist.
Exactly. Or we are going to privatize. We're going to remove the private properties and put it.
No. That's communism. That's Cuba. There's nothing like that. There's not a single Democrat candidate who is for those things. But the benefit of health insurance, that's the only thing you're talking about. And also education, saying right now we give everybody free education between the age or whenever they start school and high school. But high school graduates cannot get a job anymore because the skills are not sufficient to compete in the open market. So we're going to make the last grade not be the 12th, but be the 16th grade. We're going to include 4 years of public college. And that's also a social benefit because he's extending education. He's not creating anything new. So he's trying to extend Medicare to everybody and public schools to kids up to the 4th grade in college.
So if you see it in the white perspective, a regular American could say, listen, he could have done crimes, commit crimes, obstruction of justice, collude with the Russians, lie on the answer of the questions, not giving the written answers. Yeah. But you know what? The economy is doing well and unemployment is low. The other side of the coin, the economy is doing well for the 1/10 of 1%. The unemployment is very low, but the criticism is the quality of employment is really bad, absolutely bad. So will be those two arguments the lifesaver of Trump, or could be with possible arguments of the pre-candidates, of the candidates of the Democratic Party, have a chance to put him out of the Oval Office without necessarily to impeach him?
It could be. I think that is, the economy is not what it seems to be. Let's be clear. The president has not increased wages sufficient to say this is saving everyone. Number two, the unemployment rate has been going down since Barack Obama reorganized the economy. And it continued to go down, and it is now at a level of basically zero unemployment. Even though it's 3.7, that means that there are 3.7% of the people who don't want to work. Disabilities, young people, people who are retired, things like that. So the economy isn't perfect. It seems to be working okay for now, but this is like in a marathon. The president is running a marathon, and in the first 3 or 4 miles, he wants to eat all the energy, and he wants to be strong and run fast. But we have to look at the long-term effect of the economy. When the president created this tax cut, he basically said, we're going to make rich companies more, richer. We're going to make them richer, And because they're so rich now, because they won't pay taxes, then they'll give wage increases to their employees. That never happened. It never happens. Trickle-down economics never worked, and it won't work now. But that was the reason. Now the president has proposed now the second budget with tremendous spending. The deficit is going up. So imagine if you are at home, you bring more money home, but you haven't told your wife that you're borrowing the money from a credit card. So yes, you have more money at home and everybody's happy and the economy is strong at your house, but then your debt keeps on increasing. Eventually, we're going to have to pay this debt. So the economy is strong because the president keeps on borrowing more money, which is what he did when he was in the private sector.
Is he going to be impeached in the Congress or in the polls?
Well, maybe in the polls more than the Congress.
Joseph Malouf, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.